to introduce themselves, starting with those who are here in the room. Ms. Holly?
Hello, Holly Eskridge, Assistant Director in our Economic Development Department.
Todd DeLong, Economic Development.
Fran West, Economic Development.
Tracy Dodson, Economic Development, City Manager's Office.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Now I'm going to go to the committee members. The young lady represents District 4.
Good afternoon, Renee Johnson, District 4.
The young lady who represents us at large.
Dimple Archmiller, committee member and at-large member.
And I think my vice chair is en route.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, vice chair.
Tarek Bakari, Vice Chair.
Okay. And the representative from District 2 is en route. And so as soon as future grandpa get here, we'll allow him to introduce himself as well. Do we have any other guests on the call and the meeting? Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tracy Dodson and her staff. We have a very busy agenda. Ooh, but I got to start off with one thing. I didn't even tell Tracy this, so she might get mad. I meant to do this about 2 weeks ago, what I call a praise report, when I think staff has went beyond the call of duty. And this particular opportunity, Tracy and her staff really did a great job. We had our first ever joint ED meeting with the county. It went extremely well. So Tracy, in front of everyone, and especially your staff, thank you all for the great presentation, great work to make that meeting a success.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. We have been, as you'll see by the agenda today, we've been working really hard on a lot of different things, and so we appreciate the acknowledgement. All right, we have a packed agenda today, so I'm going to start and kick it off first with the workforce policy update. And then we'll get into tax increment grants and quick overview of the tech talent study, open for business, and our corridors work. Before we kick into the workforce policy, this goes back to July through September, where we were really digging into recommendations that were done, or recommendations that were given to the committee, referral, excuse me. One of the questions was really about workforce and what can we do more broadly across our city. That was three different referrals that we kind of condensed down into one. And then we started on some of that work. But then the other piece was, what should we have as policy around workforce development in our projects or things like that? And so that's what we want to bring to you today. The purpose of today is to give you options. We could rush to policy very quickly, but I think we want to give you options. We want to be a little bit more strategic, and then with the hearing what you all have to say today, coming back with a recommendation, perhaps in December or January, as far as next steps go. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fran West.
The gentleman from District 2 is here. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Granddaddy, Councilman District 2.
Is it?
He slid that in. So no, come on, Mal. Come on, Mal. Give us some details, man.
7 pounds, 7 ounces, born on Friday, part of Logan and Nixon.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Granddad.
There you go.
All right. Fran Powlett West, go right ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Just to reiterate what Tracy said, we are coming back to you today to present more information and follow up to the two, I feel like, really in-depth dives we had on September 14th and the 28th on workforce. So just as a refresher, let's talk about some of the things we're trying to solve for. We're trying to understand who is unemployed and why. Are the right jobs available for the people who are unemployed? And then what can the city do from a policy perspective to eliminate barriers for people in high unemployment zip codes? So the discussion for today, we're going to talk about things that we know, some policy strategies, and then at the end, I want to talk about the Corridors Labor Study survey that our team is going to be launching here in the next 2 weeks. Let's talk about things we know. Councilmember Mitchell, this slide is for you. So While we would love to, we cannot mandate hiring practices. Meaning that we cannot require that companies hire from our workforce development partners. We cannot require that people hire strategically from high unemployment zip codes. That is against the law. However, what we can do is we can set high expectations for our industries through our words and how we invest our money. And we can influence hiring practices through building trusted relationships in our business community. Next slide. So today, using those points, we have come up with 4 policy strategies for committee to consider. And I would say they kind of go from a light to heavy approach. So the first is around city construction projects, followed by kind of workforce ecosystem alignment around job placement, one around eliminating barriers by adding capacity to organizations excelling at this work. And then the 4th is to really stand up a new construction initiative to drive employment in construction and skilled trades. So we'll go through each one of these. So city construction projects. So again, we cannot mandate hiring on our construction projects. We can't require companies to hire from our partners. However, what we can do very effectively and I would say efficiently from a budget standpoint is we can convene our construction industry and communicate our challenges and goals for workforce development. We can request their participation to generate solutions based off the Holder, Edison, Ford, Leaper model at the airport and the success around that. And then what we could do is we could pre-qualify. So today, our general services team can pre-qualify contractors when we put out large construction contracts. And during that pre-qualification process, we could ask for hiring practices if they source labor from our workforce partners, and also talk to them about their minimum wages. Because I think what this does is if we can clearly communicate our challenges, goals, and opportunities, and then reinforce this through a pre-qualification program, it'll allow us to gather that data that we need to see what's happening in the industry. And then we can track it. So how do you monitor that engagement as a part of their monthly reporting that they have to do anyways around workforce, who they're hiring, their wage rates, and who their partners are to source that talent? To see if we could, maybe it's not monthly, maybe it's quarterly, but I think through that coordination and that collaboration and partnership with the construction industry, it could help us achieve our goals. And the reason, just to take a step back, why we highlight construction is when it comes to policy, this is where we really create a lot of jobs in our community. But also construction tends to be in an industry where people can get into when they have high barriers to entry. So if they have a criminal record, maybe they do, or they're an immigrant to our country, or they're young, right? And they don't have a lot of education. This is a great industry that we think is going to continue to grow in the city of Charlotte. Next slide. So for every of the 4 recommendations, I put together like a little table. So when we look at the ability to execute, we think that this would be fairly easy. Some considerations for us is, how does this align with our industry partners, meaning our workforce development partners? And can we establish like a workforce innovation fund for contractors to deploy metric-based programs? So is there a way to kind of incentivize that Holder, Edison, Leaper, Ford model? If they could like have an innovation bucket, right, around construction and putting people to work. Obstacles, or what are our metrics? Like, how do we measure our success and will it be effective? One of the things that we did say in September was data-based solutions, metric-based outcomes. And so I really want to hold us to the metric-based to understand how successful it is in our city. So cost estimate, it varies. I mean, it could be $0, right? It's convening, so maybe some snacks. And then it's, if we want to set up an innovation fund, what should that number be? And I think that this is something that we could pilot very quickly in Q1 2021 It's something that, we could put some time, energy into and launch pretty quickly and effectively. One of the key partners here is General Services. So we do need to get with Phil and his team to understand how we would go about doing this, but it seems to be a fairly quick way to integrate in some of the strategy into our community. Next slide. So all in on jobs. So this is where one of the things that I have done over the past couple months is really try and learn more about our workforce ecosystem. And what I hear from council is all about putting people into jobs, reducing that unemployment percentage. And so how do we galvanize our partners around the job placement of unemployed residents into career opportunities? So not necessarily job placement into, part-time food service. And I really want to emphasize into the career opportunities. So we invest in strategic outreach to unemployed residents to connect them with our workforce partners. When I've spoken with Danielle Frazier at Charlotte Works quite a bit throughout this process. She's been a great mentor. And as we've talked about some of the things that can make her job and her organization more effective is really having that trusted partner in some of these high unemployment areas to let them in. They also have an incredible tool called the Talent Source Network. How do we help build that up from both an operations and marketing perspective? So the Talent Source Network, and I'm going to say this at a very high level, is how, if let's just say I go out, I meet with a company and they have 200 jobs they need filled. Theoretically, I would send this to them. They would put it out to their Talent Source Network. Their partners in the community would identify candidates who are in their system. And then we would funnel those screened and qualified individuals back to the company as kind of like our recommendations for them to interview. It's a really incredible tool, but how do we get it to where it needs to work the way that it does? It needs to be effective. And then how do we market it out? And then create a city existing business team to really focus on connecting with existing businesses to source job opportunities. Our team does a really good job in prospective business and Holly's small business and entrepreneurial work, but there's like this missing gap that we could really commit more time and energy to complement some of the work that the county's doing around existing business outreach. And then you just make that connection, right? You connect the companies to our workforce partners who connect to our residents, who then our residents connect to the companies, and we create this full circle for employment. And it can be very metric based. So every quarter we could count and tally the number of people placed in jobs, what their average wage was, and then track them for the duration in that job, which would continue to provide us the data we need to evolve. Next slide. So the ability to execute this, I'd say it's easy to medium, and really that's because of the considerations. Do our partners have the capacity to do this work? And do they have the ability to galvanize around the all in on jobs approach? All of these organizations are doing great work in our community. They all have strategic plans that are shaping the work that they're doing. Does it make sense for them to galvanize around this approach? And do they need financial incentives to do so? The obstacles could be an unpredictable job market. I think we now, we have election day behind us at this point, so hopefully we'll get some stability in that front. But also, how do we continue to engage the unemployed, right? So the people who may not be career ready. The cost estimate, and again, these are just, swag numbers, but let's say $500,000, which would fund maybe an additional city staff person, and then financial incentives for our partners. We think that we could launch this in Q2 2021. I think that we need to do and have more in-depth conversations with our partners, and not just our large partners like Goodwill and Urban League, but also some of the smaller groups that are doing really great work in our community, like the Freedom Community Partners, and that are doing really great work, and some of the other smaller groups. We had a great call with Emily Yaffe, Councilmember Mitchell, you were on that, but engaging with the Latin American Council and how we can engage different parts of our city. So our third approach is building off all-in-on jobs, but really tackling barriers. And y'all have heard me talk about barriers every time we presented. But building off this survey that we're about to launch in with Ernst & Young, we're going to determine, hopefully we'll get good feedback, what are the top barriers faced by people to getting a job along our corridors? What we want to do is aggregate that data and then identify partners that are successfully doing this work in our community, and then build their capacity to do more by executing performance-based contracts with our partners. Then, in addition, what we would do is if we could remove some of the barriers, right, or help offset some of those barriers, and then additionally execute on that all-in-on-job strategy that we just talked about, I think that we could really see a turn in our unemployment percentages. But those metrics, again, they're easily measured, right? So the number of people placed in jobs, the average wage, their duration, and we could even start to quantify that barrier removal and maybe some of the cost associated with that. Next slide. So yeah, it's medium to hard. Barrier removal is hard. If it was easy, it would have been done by now. But our considerations are, do we focus on a specific barrier? Can partners expand their capacity to serve? What kind of financial incentives would work best for this tool? And then obstacles, again, it's the job market and engaging the unemployed. And I keep coming back to engaging the unemployed because we have to be able to reach people for this to be successful. And I think that we're really going to have to rely on our community partners who, churches and neighborhood groups and things of that nature to really help us reach people. But barriers are expensive, right, to make an impact. So I bumped the cost estimate up pretty high on this one. The county's doing $2 million every 2 years to Charlotte Work. So it's around $1 million a year. I think that's correct, about upskilling underemployed and youth into careers. And so if they're going to focus on underemployed and youth, could we focus on the unemployed and the barriers and kind of match them? And so that's where I came up with $1 million. And again, our timeline, I would say this is more of Q3. This would have to be a budget discussion. But the pilot, we would do it for a year with the goal to be recurring every year if it's a success. And next slide, please. And then last but not least is let construction lead the way. So let's build off the Denver model, create a standalone workforce program in Charlotte. I think the key takeaway from this program is industry needs to own this. What we have found is that industry-led initiatives are far more successful. And so it would really rely on the construction industry owning this program. But as I said earlier, it seems to be the easiest path for people with high barriers to enter into. We could form strategic partnerships with our workforce providers and skilled trades, which could build future capacity of MWSBEs. Tracking individuals, since this is a new organization, essentially, we could track individuals not just from when they come in or the next year, but for 2 and 3. And how do we continue to track people to see the success of the model? And again, back to, it's same thing. It's metrics driven, right? We understand how many people are employed, what they're getting paid, and their duration in a job. Next slide. And so I think this is probably the hardest, only because it would have to be a new industry-led organization, but it does create the highest potential, we think, for job creation and placement. You could look into the apprenticeship program model, and it would also allow for barrier support because, again, it's more of a comprehensive industry initiative that's focused on that whole person and getting them into a career. The obstacles are how do we engage the unemployed, the immigrant population, and the youth. The cost, so Denver costs about $1.2 million a year. That's for 6 staff people, and it's been up for a while. So we just ballparked some numbers and said, let's say it's not half, but maybe it's a little more than half. So we said $700,000 recurring for a period of 3 years. And why we say 3 years is we've got to give it time to get up, where a lot of our pilots are a year. I think when you stand up something new, you've really got to be committed to seeing it for a couple years. But should this be something that you would want to go towards, we think it could be operational first Q3, so July, the summer 2021. Next slide. So in summary, there are 4 different alternatives that we can look at. They all have different price considerations. I think that we could pilot all of them. I think the construction, all-in on jobs and the barriers, you could pilot for a year. But I think to truthfully see long-term results, the barriers would be great to do it for longer than a year. But the construction one would definitely be probably a 3-year commitment. So this is my last summary slide on all of them. Do you have any questions or comments?
So
Really good stuff. Stop and talk about.
The Reentry Partners meeting for years. There's a monthly meeting of partners in the community that are working with individuals who have criminal records. So when you talk about the building capacity for those that are already doing the work, they have the relationships, they have the partnerships, and the population is already familiar with those organizations. So we met with Hope Marshall. We were trying to obtain the data of those that are affected. Hope referred us to the North Carolina Department of Public Safety Research Department. We believe now that there's about 55,000 individuals in the community who have been released from prison or have a felony record or a misdemeanor record that have barriers to employment. So it's quite a huge barrier in the community, and that's one way to address it. I know that the city participated in the Second Chance Job Fair recently. I think it was the 29th of October. So that's great news. So there is some focus and emphasis on working with this population, but there's already a group that's doing the work, and I think it's great if we can build the capacity for those organizations.
Councilmember Johnson, thank you for
department, and Hope is over that department, so I'm happy to share that information with you guys offline.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Johnson. And Councilmember Ed, so Fran, I like how you put in here, what are some of the barriers? So Councilmember Ashmere, can you give a recap from the 2 meetings? Well, I missed the last one, but the last meeting we had is we talked about identifying barriers to help our citizens gain employment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as Fran mentioned, that when we talk about barriers, it's not easy, right? We are looking at folks that have multiple barriers to workforce, and we had an opportunity to meet with various folks who are already doing the grassroots work. We had met with Jose at Latin American Coalition. We had met with Nimish with the Asian American Chamber, and we had also met with Astrid over at Simmons YMCA in East Charlotte. And I know Fran had done a presentation a couple of weeks ago on our unemployment numbers, where one of the zip codes was actually close to Eastland site, where we have very high unemployment rate. And for that community, we gotta have a custom program that addresses the barriers, especially for our immigrant and refugee community. And there is a heavy population of immigrants and refugees that live close to that site. So we had worked with Frederico and Emily. They had done a great job of compiling all the recommendations that were provided by these organizations. And the recommendations were around focused on addressing the language barrier, providing the support to the partner organizations because we couldn't do this on our own, and also providing more support for our immigrant-owned and refugee-owned businesses because they do have there are more challenges in terms of access to capital. So we can address those barriers with implementing workforce development program, cater for that community, but at the same time, really providing some sort of entrepreneurship opportunities to those existing business owners there and continued business support. So there are 4 recommendations that came out as a result of those 2 discussions. And I will let Frederico present those recommendations to us. And also I want to highlight, we are one of very few large cities in the nation that do not have, that do not provide ESL program, especially for our adults. I have seen many large cities that have significant amount of population when it comes to immigrants and foreign-born population. City provides that ESL program to really help get these adults some language skills. So this is not academic program, but it's really designed for people to just get employment opportunity. So if we can also lead in that space, that would certainly help us tackle workforce development. And it also addresses economic mobility. We are looking at, I know in everything we do, we are looking at economic mobility as to how we help these folks get to work, but then how do we also help folks to get from one level of income to next. And I think this kind of program will help us tackle those barriers. And I certainly appreciated when Fran had mentioned that county is working on underemployed and we could focus on unemployed, so we can use this divide and conquer strategy with county to address workforce development issue. Also, I want to give kudos to Fran for always being metrics driven, because that is the best way to assess if the program is working or if it's not working. So I would like us to have a pilot program for this community and really leverage our influence to get these folks employment opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ajmer. I echo your thoughts about the matrix so we can make sure our programs are successful. Any more comments on workforce policy update? Staff, thank you for the summary. We'll bring this back in December. Vice Chair or Granddad? Granddad is good. Vice Chair, any comments? Oh, okay.
Nope, good to go.
Okay. Thank you all. Tracy?
I know. Can we go to the next slide? Well, the biggest thing is really how do these strategies marry with our EY labor study? So one of the things that I just wanted to let everyone know today is that this week, hopefully, we are going to be launching a survey in our corridors to understand if you are unemployed or employed, some of the challenges you face, the industries you work in, because we need to, well, we have a lot of data, quantitative, we don't have the qualitative. So we don't understand the barriers. We don't know what you want to do if you're unemployed or how you seek to get a job. And so one of the things I just want to hit on is we will need your help pushing that survey out. To Councilmember Ajmira's point, we're going to be developing customized approaches for each of these corridors, but we cannot do it unless we hear from our residents. And so I just think that is very important. Donata down there promised to help me with this, so we'll be getting it out. So when you see that come, please be on the lookout and please share with your constituents. So thank you.
So just to say, I think we have at least District 2, District 4, in which are two important corridors of part of opportunity. So Fran, just for clarification, is it only our corridors of opportunity or all our corridors? Which one we want to?
So I think, we're going to launch it citywide essentially.
Okay.
Because we want to know, we're going to ask people if they would share their zip code with us.
Okay.
Or their neighborhood, so we can try and pinpoint
Okay.
specifically for our corridors of opportunity. That's what this is really focused on.
Okay.
But we want to hear from everybody who's willing to participate in this survey. So just any way that we can get it out, let's get it out and get that data.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you. Just wanted to know if we could see a copy of the questions before they're sent out, or if you could give us an idea of what type of questions from a human service perspective. Are we asking questions about disability or mental illness or anything like that? We know in a state like ours, without Medicaid expansion, there are a lot of folks that are walking around who aren't getting the appropriate treatment, which also leads to disability. So how in depth is this survey going, or what type of questions will be asked?
Yeah, so I can follow up with you separately if you would like for me to share the survey in essence of time. But we do ask quite a few questions about barriers faced. We've run it through quite a few channels to check it, including Emily Yaffe. I've showed it to Donata. I've shown it to quite a few people to try and make sure that we are, it's a sensitive topic, but we want to get as much data as we can. So what's the appropriate mix for that? So Councilmember Johnson, I can follow up with you and preview the survey with you if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Great job, Fran, the pilot, Wes. She had pilot in there 4 times. Did y'all count how many times she had the word pilot? Tracy?
Thank you, Councilmember Mitchell. Thank you, Fran. That's policy. And let me remind everybody, this was referred to committee this summer. There's been a lot of discussion with our council as well as with the commission about the policies, our policy, their policy. We felt like it was a good time just to kind of re-educate everybody on what the policy is, how it works, and to remind everybody this isn't the only tool that we have. It's not the end-all be-all. We are creating tools, to Fran's word, pilots that we're using all over the place. But we felt like it was a good time to probably go back over what the policy is, hear from you all today. Are there certain pieces of the policy that you would like us to look at or discuss, or do we need to make tweaks, or are we comfortable with what it is? With that, I will turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the committee. As Tracy mentioned, we see this as a beginning of a conversation, and we want to make sure we're starting that conversation on the same page with education and what the tax increment is, how we use it in Charlotte, why we use it in Charlotte, and some of the activity that we've done over the last 15 years with tax increment grants. I think some folks may be surprised that we don't use it as often as what some people think we might use it. Again, this is the beginning of the conversation, and I'd like to get through this to a point where we can actually have a conversation from the committee, because we'd love to hear from you guys and get a sense of where you want us to take this program, how we want to enhance it. It's been a few years since this has been updated, and so I think there's certainly opportunity to update it. And I want to make sure that we're articulating the needs and desires of the committee and the council as we take this forward. Next slide, please. Thanks. Let's talk about why we use tax increment grants. And so one of the best tools available for transformative projects, to support transformative projects, to partner with developers on transformative projects around the country is tax increment. Every state has a different way they utilize tax increment. In Charlotte, we generally use these tax increment grants. And one of the benefits of them, they encourage us to use public-private partnerships, which you all know, we have P3s or public-private partnerships are so important to what we do in Charlotte and success that we've had over the last several years about how we're effectively working with the private sector. We have a long-standing history of successful P3s in the Charlotte area. And TIGs are just one mechanism by which we can work with the private sector to deliver development that is financially feasible and provides opportunities to further the goals of the city and the community. Another thing we look at with tax increment grants is, in many cases, developments may not occur without our support through a tax increment grant, or if they would occur, they wouldn't occur to the level that they would be if our support wasn't there. So that's where it comes into an opportunity for us to influence the type of development program, and the form of that development is incredibly important that we have a say in how that development takes place and how it unfolds in our community. Typical improvements that we use with the tax increment grants, what we might reimburse, the most common by far is public infrastructure. That is the most common mechanism for us to enter into a tax increment grant program or an agreement. We've also sparingly used it for public parking and public assets, and workforce and affordable housing can be used, but there are really strict statutory regulations by which it is used for the purpose of workforce housing. But we can tie workforce housing requirements in with our grant. So the money may not go directly towards the housing, but it comes as a benefit of what we're working through for the infrastructure or something else. That's where it comes into our ability to influence the development that takes place. So let's go back to the policy. The policy was approved by City Council in 2007. So it has been a few years. We're looking forward to opportunities to enhance this along the way. And I want to make sure that everybody understands what we do and what our policy is. We do not put any money up front. We do not, our money is always last in. They are grants that are made on a reimbursement basis only. They're performance-based, so they are based on new incremental taxes that are generated by the project within a defined increment area. Again, the justification or our public purpose, if you will, for us to participate in these types of agreements are infrastructure and gap financing. Even when we do gap financing, which we've only done once, actually, if we do gap financing, there has to be some type of public purpose for our money goes into. We cannot put money directly into a private project through this tool. The traditional terms are 45 or 90% of incremental taxes, up to 10 to 25 years, depending on the project need and priority. I'll say that we've had, in the last 15, 20 years, we've had 3 that have had terms beyond 10 years. So those were Ballantyne Reimagined, in the Cultural Facilities Campus. Hopefully tonight, you guys will vote and we'll have a 4th that goes beyond 10 years. With the Eastland, so we're looking forward to that. And then we'll get into a breakdown of some of our recent grants later in the discussion, later in the presentation. And another point of note is the aggregate of all projects is limited to 3% of the annual property tax levy of any given year. Right now, we're sitting at about 0.63%. So we do have some capacity on that and moving that forward. Next slide. So with this slide, I wanted to provide sort of an illustrative example of how tax increment works. So the purple line represents what a development or a site would be without any development on top of it. So that development is providing or generating $1 in sales in property tax to the city. The green represents the new development that comes onto that site. And so basically saying that with the new development, the total taxes that are generated by that property are going to be $11. The incremental taxes that are generated is that 11 less the 1. So we hold the base or that $1 frozen, And then anything above and beyond that would be considered to be incremental and would be going towards our tax increment grant reimbursement payment.
So I just want to pause here really quickly and explain, because I think this slide is really important in how this tool can work for some projects, but not all projects. And so if you think about a project, we have one on Beatty's Ford tonight, actually all three, the ones that come forward on Beatty's Ford tonight, don't really fit a tax increment grant scenario because they're not new construction. So when you look at what that baseline is, yes, there will be an increase, but it won't be a huge increase for that in order for there to be a recapture back to the property owner or developer.
I have one question. Councilmember Ashmere.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Todd, if you can go back to slide number 3, where you had public parking. Okay, so I remember when we were discussing 7th and Tryon, this public parking had come up. And I know that as we are developing transportation footprint, and as we are reimagining how we get to uptown, we have to revisit public parking and where it is located. Is it best for us to fund public parking in uptown? And I think, so I don't know when this was last updated, but we got to look at, especially when it comes to public parking, the location and the site, and whether that is, whether that aligns with our overall comprehensive plan for the city or not. And so I really hope that we would look at that more in depth. Also, if you go to slide number 4, and so Todd, you had explained the capacity, the last bullet point. I did not follow you. Could you just repeat that or explain it again?
Certainly. So on the capacity issue, so the aggregate of all projects, meaning the aggregate of our annual payments of all of our active tax increment grant projects, is limited to the 3% of an annual property tax levy of any given year. So meaning that basically it's 3% of our budget. So we are limited and restricted about how much we can actually dedicate our property taxes in our reimbursement grant agreements.
Got it. So it can, so I guess year over year, it cannot be over 3%.
Correct.
To continue to meet our general debt obligation. Is that why?
Yes.
I guess, how do we arrive at 3%? I'm just curious.
That's a question I don't know the answer to. I can find that out for you, but I'm not sure what that answer is.
Okay, well, has there ever been a concern where a development had come in front of us and, we said, okay, well, this is over our 3% projections and we can't really take a look at it? I mean, if it's not an issue, I don't think we need to
It's
visit.
generally not an issue, and it would have to be an extremely sizable development to get to that level. I mean, extremely large, considering that of all of our projects right now, we're only at 0.6%. It'd have to be a really large project.
So Councilmember Ashmere, I would say, make this comment before I turn to Tracy. Councilmember Driggs has been very hands-on when it comes to our TIG, and he raises the same question just to make sure we have not reached our capacity. So Tracy, you want to address the other
Yeah,
question?
what I was gonna say related to going back to the summer with the 7th and North Tryon question that I think we should often think about, and I think sometimes we get caught up in, is what is the tax increment grant legally paying for and contributing to versus our reasons for contributing to the overall project. And so, Councilmember Ashmere, I definitely hear you. Should we be supporting projects and parking in uptown? And I understood very clearly from several council members what the issue was this summer. But I also think that sometimes we look at these, we get hung up on exactly what the TIG is paying for versus the overall benefit. Does it check multiple boxes of what we're looking for in public benefit or public purpose versus what it's actually legally tying itself to. And so I'll use, because it's in front of us tonight, I'll use the example of Eastland. I think Eastland checks a lot of boxes. We're tying a tax increment grant to parking in this location, primarily to parking, a little bit to infrastructure. But what we're saying is you're getting the affordable housing, you will get the, you'll get the park space, we'll get all of these other public benefits onto the site. And that there is the reason for supporting it, not necessarily just what it is specifically tied to or paying for.
So, just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, Tracy, I understand that, you know, when we are looking at TIG, we are certainly looking at the overall benefit. However, when we are reviewing a specific development, and in this case, I'm going to use 7th and North Tryon example. Since our TIG money was tied to the public parking, that really had raised concerns, especially among those who had invested heavily into our overall walkable, bikeable Charlotte comprehensive plan. So I guess legally, do we have to tie to a specific component of the project, or can we just have sort of a public purpose that is just looks at overall benefit without tying it to a specific subpart of the development?
Todd, I'm gonna let you weigh in on that, but what I thought I heard you say is it can't necessarily be money to a private developer. It has to tie to something that has a public use.
It has to tie to a public purpose. That's the requirement.
I think since our investment is tied to a specific thing within the development, I really firmly believe that we have to look at the public parking. I just, you know, I wasn't really excited or thrilled that our public or our TIG money was tied to a public parking in downtown. And that doesn't help with our transportation goals, or that doesn't help with our CF goals. So yes, we are looking at the overall benefit, but then we also have other plans such as transportation plan, environment plan. And when there is a conflict, you know, how do we assess that? So really that's where the challenge comes in. So I don't know what is the transportation committee's input on this, or if they have weighed into this overall TIG policy.
So I will say this is, and this was part of the reason we're bringing this back, was to have the discussion about, because it came up specifically this summer, do we want to continue to support TIGs in specific areas of our city that have perhaps transit and other mobility when it comes to parking? The one thing I would tell us that we probably should do, and one thing that maybe Todd and I can dig into a little bit more, is if we took TIGs for parking off the table for something like Uptown, what does that do? Because the one thing I'll tell you is Uptown has a lot of infrastructure. You know, there sometimes is an argument in certain parts of Uptown that we do need more public parking, but it potentially could take TIGs off the table for Uptown in a lot of different areas if we don't have other things like a park, because there's an image of First Ward Park on this slide. But if we don't have major other infrastructure, it could be hard to use a TIG for something Uptown. So we'll do a little bit of analysis on that for you, Councilman Rajmera, and bring that back as the next discussion piece.
I got one question.
Well, and hopefully Taiwo and others who have worked on the mobility and CF plan could also weigh in how to go about it. When there is a conflict where we are trying to do economic incentives, but it doesn't necessarily align with our CF goals or our mobility goals. So we got to do it all. And I don't know how we do it. Some maybe experts can help us figure that out.
Thank you, Councilmember Edgemere. Great conversation. I'm gonna go to the granddad and then Councilmember Johnson.
Just a quick question, and going back to the phrase public purpose, And I know we kind of stretched that a little bit on Beatties Ford Road to a certain extent. And so at some point when you guys come back, we really want to have maybe drill down just a little bit more on that. So as the council moves forward, if we have to have a understanding among the 11 of us and staff in terms of what that means moving forward, I think that would be a beneficial conversation to have.
I agree with you, Councilmember Graham. I think that what Todd and I have been talking about, also with the manager, is when we're talking, what are all our tools and what are the parameters around all of our tools, right? So we're moving at an enormous pace on the corridors to come up with creative ideas, but we're also coming up with new and creative ideas that don't necessarily have that framework around them, and we need to come back and do that. But then we also need to, what I'm envisioning is almost like a matrix of where do you use these tools, how do we use them, so that you all have kind of the full menu of what it is and what they are.
I agree with that. So, not today, but certainly as we kind of move forward with this discussion, I think that would be really beneficial.
Okay.
Councilmember Johnson?
I think the question may piggyback off Councilmember Graham's, but I just want to make sure I understand the TIG policy, because we did discuss the TIG for the university project. I know that we're in negotiations for that, and also for the Beatties Ford project. I'm looking at the TIG policy, section 2C, and it also states that the provision can be used for gap funding if it fits into, it says the projects in the business corridor strategic plan geographic that add value to the city. So it seems like there's more than one criteria where TIG can be used. Is this policy something, and I think that's what Todd said at the beginning, can the city council take a look at expanding the requirements or the qualifications for projects that to qualify for a TIG? Because we know the traditional ones or the ones in the past that have not generated the tax revenue, but this seems like a creative option to bring more opportunity to the table in the corridors or in the university district where they are not fitting into the understanding or the way that we're applying this now. It looks like the policy might allow some of these projects that don't generate the tax revenue. So can you elaborate, if you will, on the section C of the TIG policy that states if it fits into our corridor or our priority?
Certainly. And so let me preface it with saying that the language for the policy is written in such a way, at least I'm speculating, the language is written in such a way to allow for as flexibility as possible and for us to be as nimble as possible to have the best impact from this program. And so when it comes to gap financing, that does allow us greater opportunities to participate in projects. The only one that we have done so far that has used gap financing is the Metropolitan, and that was in 2006 or 7-ish. But that still requires a public purpose. And so the difference between the infrastructure versus the gap funding or the gap financing piece of it is when it comes to the gap, we have a much greater scrutiny of review of those proposals that come to us from the private sector. And so we need to make sure that we see their pro forma from a development and operating side. We need to make sure that there is a demonstrated gap, whether that gap is from parking, whether that gap is from infrastructure, whatever have you. We need to make sure that there is a legitimate gap in order to basically satisfy the gap financing requirements. Now, we can certainly get into corridors, and we love to have more opportunities to participate on projects in corridors, but as you'll see in a slide, either the next one or the one after that, where we lay out the value of a project is a strong determinant of our ability to participate. And so some of the projects along our corridors, traditionally, particularly say at Beatties Ford or some of the others, just because that's what we have tonight, they are at a value that isn't going to generate substantial taxes or incremental taxes that would allow us to put dollars towards infrastructure or other public components. So that's really the crux of it, is how much can that project generate to basically to satisfy the cost of the infrastructure, other public purpose that we might participate in.
I think you teed it up for slide 6.
So this is the slide I was talking about. I know there are a lot of numbers on there, so sorry about that. This is looking at basically a 45% tax increment grant over a 10-year period. And what you find on the left column is the incremental taxable value. So for today's discussion, let's assume that the property we're talking about has 0 current taxable value. So you have a $1 million project, a $5 million project, all the way up to 150 and beyond. And so the columns to the right, you'll see the city participation at a 45% tax increment grant, the county's participation at a 45%, and then the total. Underneath the 45% is the annual taxes that are generated that could be reimbursed through a TIG. And under the 10 years, obviously, are what the total is over a 10-year period. So as you see, anything less than $50 million isn't really going to generate substantial tax increment to be able to support the type of infrastructure improvements that we're normally called to help pay for through our grant. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that this TIG, or this program, isn't a one-size-fits-all. So for the smaller projects, or the projects that may not have a high budget as, say, 50 million, there may need to be other tools. And we do have other tools at our disposal that we're creating for Beatties Ford and for some of the other areas that I think might be more aligned with some of those projects that are, say, between the $5 and $25 million range. In some cases, some of our tools there are providing more revenue and more participation than we would have if we were just doing a tax increment grant.
And staff on it, and I love this slide because I think it helps all of us get a little bit more comfortable with TIG. But as I shared with Trace, I think it would be a good exercise if we looked at a TIG just for the corridors, for example. The only reason I say that, we put in a lot, $24.5 million in our corridors. I think having an additional toolbox for our corridors, because I do think TIGs work better on new construction. And as you go to some of our corridors, it's not new construction, it's remodeling. Malcolm probably has 3 in his corridor, and most of them are, remodeling. Renee, I think you're gonna have 1 or 2, and even on Central Avenue, I think Central and Almar Road, having Eastland is really on our example of a new construction. So if we could think kind of out of the box, particularly in our corridors, I think that's our focus. It'd be good to see how can we add something.
But Councilmember Mitchell and Todd, you'll have to keep me honest here on the numbers. I think if we look at 2, so for Eastland, we proposed 45%, but we had to take it to 20 years.
Correct.
So we had to extend the timeline to be able to realize the value that would be created. But then I think if you look at some of the projects that we're bringing forward tonight, and one, for example, is about a $1.9 million project. And so just look at that top line, a 10-year payback period. That's number one, the issue number one. Number 2, requires the county to participate. And then number 3, we're doing a loan for over $500,000, where if you did a $1.8 million project, for a TIG, you're generating less than $100,000. And we're actually doing a loan for more than that, in a grant for more than that. And so you just see where I think new construction on corridors, new construction anywhere in our city would help qualify better, but it's not necessarily a great tool for rehab or reuse unless it's something that's very large. So I don't want us to get stuck in this geographic place of where do we use TIGs, more about where does a TIG work or not work, and it's more about new construction or a higher valuation. I think for some of these other projects, providing grants and loans might work better.
Good point. I'm gonna go to Councilmember Ashmere and Councilmember Johnson.
Yes, so I agree with Tracy that, for rehab and reuse, we have to look at another tool. I'm trying to understand, so are there any economic impact requirements to qualify for TIG, or have you looked at that?
She said any economic impact requirements part of the TIG, the economic impact.
there are no job requirements. However, job creation is a reason for us to participate and start thinking about a tax increment grant, which, thank you for bringing that up, because that was my next slide, actually refers to a project where we did just that.
So we are not really looking at the economic impact either. All we are looking at is the tax base. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's where the challenge is for rehab, reuse, where they may not have much of a tax base increase, and what are other tools we can use. So I'll wait for that. Thanks.
Good point, Councilman Ashmere. Councilmember Johnson?
Yes. So my question is, we're looking at a 2007 policy that I assume was developed by city council then. We know that this council's priorities have changed. We just approved a carless housing development. So our policy, our priorities have changed. And I do see this as a tool that can help those developments, that may not have been approved in the past, but there are some opportunities. So is this something that council can take a look at, reviewing this policy, no longer aligns or may need to be reviewed to where council's priorities are now?
So Councilmember Johnson, I think you're spot on. I think our staff said, let's look at it, let's have discussion at a high level, let's continue to have a conversation in December. I have to admit, Tracy was more aggressive than me. That's kind of surprisingly, because I'm always pushing her. But she was thinking we can finish this up in December. I'm okay if it takes us to January, and I tell you why. It's to your point, that policy was 2007. We were not the 15th largest city in America. Our priorities have changed. The city has grown. So we need to be more creative and find ways to move all parts of Charlotte. So that's why we're here. I want people to think out the box, give staff some direction, and in December we'll continue the conversation. And Tracy and I have a bet: is we're gonna have a policy in December, or it's gonna go over to January. And Granddad said February. Okay.
Well, and Chairman Mitchell, I think that we focused on parts of this policy, and I still, I look at things sort of concretely, and Section C is separate than A and B. So there can be some opportunities to interpret this differently, I think. So, and the current policy is why there's this gap with Charlotte, the haves and the have-not. The wealthy developments are the ones that are eligible for this assistance. So if there are opportunities to develop in our corridors, or for smaller construction organizations to benefit from city assistance, we need to take a look at it.
Excellent point. Todd, you want to finish up? Sure.
Near the airport that create additional job opportunities for our community going forward. We talk about leverage ratio a lot, and that's one of the benefits of this program, is where we can get into private development and participate with private development and maximize the ability to leverage our public investment with a private investment. So here we have a leverage ratio of 60 to 1, meaning that for every one of our dollars, $60 of the private dollars are invested into a project. Some notable benefits from this project are 1,500 new jobs, the infrastructure improvements, and then we always have MWSBE requirements within these agreements. For this particular project, we have 16% SBE and 10% MBE. Next slide. So this is Pro Park in Midtown that it was originally approved by City Council in 2016, and then we amended the agreement in 2020 to expand the increment area as well as expand some of the scope of work based on some of the market conditions changing and the amount of office development that's occurring at the Pearl Park area. This is another 10%, 45% increment, also includes the county, 7.17 total. Our piece of that is roughly 2.5 million. Leverage ratio based on our investment is 120 to 1. So it's a pretty sizable leverage, particularly given our goal is 10 to 1. Some notable benefits here is that out of the Midtown Moorhead Cherry area plan, we're talking about new desired street and bicycle pedestrian connectivity and advancement of the urban infill that was called for in that planning process. We also have an improved Pearl Street Park. And then we also get to acquisition of new land that expands opportunities for more affordable housing in that area in partnership with Charlotte Housing Authority.
So one thing I want to say on this one is, just to highlight as one example, is where we talked about how this works with planning and things like that. And this is an example of where an area plan informed us of the TIG investment, right?
Right.
Because it was already a part of the adopted area plan.
And then the most recent until tonight, next slide, please. Most recent until tonight is the Ballantyne Reimagined. As you recall from several conversations over the past year, this is a sizable development in Ballantyne. This tax increment term is a little bit different than some of the others, where it did go out 15 years. It's 45%. Also includes the county. Total of $25 million reimbursing infrastructure improvements, looking at an estimated private investment of $1.5 billion, so very sizable private investment, leads to a leverage ratio of 172 to 1. And some of the notable benefits here are obviously the expanded infrastructure, supply of affordable workforce housing in the Ballantyne area, as well as the MWSB utilization associated with the infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. So I'll end on sort of a summary of what our activity has been since 2004. So beginning with since 2015, we've approved 4 tax increment grants. So we average about 1 a year. So we don't do that many of them. This year is a little bit different. We're looking at doing a couple. Yeah. So keeping it busy this year. So all 4 will reimburse the developer for designing and constructing public infrastructure improvements. 3 of the 4 include terms requiring the developer to expand the supply of affordable and workforce housing. The county's participation is in most of the 4, but not in all of the 4. Since 2004, 16 TIGs have been approved by City Council. 12 will reimburse for public infrastructure. 2 will reimburse the developer for public parking. The 2 that are reimbursing for public parking is the Metropolitan and First Ward. Some of the others, such as Bright Walk, Double Oaks, and Cultural Facilities Campus, are a little bit different in nature and how those are set up. Again, back to our private leveraging, we have a goal of 10 to 1. Since 2004, we've been at 28 to 1. Since 2015, we're at 119 to 1. So considering a leverage as a parameter or as a metric of how we're performing in this program, we're doing pretty well in this program. And a couple other things to mention, as I mentioned before, 3 have terms beyond 10 years, which is Ballantyne Reimagined, Cultural Facilities Campus. 9 of the 16 TIGs are 45%. We have gone to 90%, but we haven't done any 90% recently. So we do have the opportunity to go to 90, but just almost all of them recently have been 45%. Next slide, please. And so back to what Tracy and I mentioned earlier, this is something that we wanted to provide a general update and an overview of the program. But I think what we'd really benefit from is hearing conversation from the committee and understanding where your goals are and what gaps might you see in the existing policy that we can help support, as well as where are the priorities that we can start to target for this program. As we mentioned, there are going to be certain parameters we've got to abide by. The enabling legislation really dictates what we can and can't use our dollars for, which is really important to this program, particularly given the amount of money that usually comes into it. And then also the tax base. That's, without tax dollars being generated, we can't do anything with this program. So that's why it's more beneficial to have projects that are a higher tax value than lower tax value. It doesn't mean that this is, again, this is not a one-size-fits-all. So if there are gaps in the project value, then we just may need to come up with additional tools which we're trying to with the corridors of opportunities, which is on the agenda tonight. So that's part of that effort.
So committee, in sake of time, I'm gonna try to hit the high level notes that I heard. Councilmember Ashmere talked about the policy and make sure there's a collaboration that we don't negative impact like a transportation, a TAP policy or affordable housing policy. I think Councilman Johnson and all of us like to see the TIG language, just so we all can get educated and get familiar. I think Grandpa said it best. Let's take our time on this one. And so Tracy and I both might lose, and Grandpa might be right. This could be a February. I think it's more important that we do it right. And to me, right is how do we continue to make sure this policy can be citywide, and as well as, to your point, Todd, in those corridors, maybe we need to think outside the TIG and what other tools we need to have in our tool shed. So did I capture all of them looking at my committee? Grandpa says yes. Councilmember Johnson, did I capture everything, kind of takeaways, so they can bring back to us in December?
I'm looking at the language I can send to you. I just want to know that we are thinking outside the box when we're looking at it. There seems to be more opportunity to implement this TIG in different areas. That's all. And maybe we should take a look at that as a council.
Councilmember Ashmere, did I cover all the takeaways that we given staff?
Yes, and I'd just like to add a couple of things from the last two slides that Todd had covered. So I want us to have a sort of clear understanding when we have 10 years versus 15 years or more. Also, when we do 45 versus 90, I think we got to have a clear criteria for those. And if we can review those, that would be great.
Vice Chair, Vice Chair, do we leave off anything for staff to bring back to us in December?
Nope, everything sounds good.
Okay. Todd, thank you. And now we got a hard stop team at 3:30.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yes, you may.
Can we do open for business and move the tech talent study to December?
Okay.
Because I think the open for business, just because I know there's been a lot of media requests, update requests, things like that, and I want to make sure that you all hear some of that before any of that were to come out.
Sounds great. So we'll move Charlotte Tech Talent to December, and we're turning it over to Holly Capital Eskridge.
Okay, I'll take it.
been waiting on that.
That's my nickname. I was waiting for it. I like it. I like it. So thanks so much for having me today. I've got some really exciting updates to the programs. I will say, just to compliment you all, this strategy that I'm about to talk about, it encompasses over $56 million, and that's over 35% of the city's entire CARES Act budget. So I just want to say thank you so much for this. I know our workforce and small business communities are absolutely appreciative. All right, so the first thing on the list is the Open for Business website. So the Charlotte Communications team has been absolutely amazing. This is the site that we actually use to brand the entire strategy. Everything that we do, every program is listed on this site. So you'll see really to date, the small business programs that we've launched are listed on there, as well as the workforce programs. And then there's a new Meet Charlotte campaign that is Fran West's team. It's got some really good data. It's got the fantastic Meet Charlotte video on it. So those are what the site currently looks like. Next slide. And then the future will be building out the Meet Charlotte content. We really look at this as it's not just about large company recruitment, but this can actually be a tool for recruiting entrepreneurs, workforce, et cetera. So that's incredibly exciting, I think, for our team and for our city. A jobs connector platform, and then we're also going to migrate charlottebusinessresources.com, which is the website that we've had for our small business community, into Open for Business, so it's one seamless branding and messaging. Next slide. So this is a small business recovery fund. This is the $30 million fund. Some people refer to it as access to capital, but it is a small business recovery fund. This is the partnership we have with Foundations for the Carolinas as the grant administration partner. They've been absolutely wonderful. 2,466 awards to date. 70% of those are micro, which is was your number one priority. 30% of those are small, so small is 6 to 25 employees, and then 5 and under is micro. 63% of the awards are minority-owned businesses. Now, when we brought in the companies that have received like PPP or something like that funding before, we still feel like that number is excellent from an industry standard. 42% are women-owned businesses, and then 73% have been in business for 4 or more years, so I just thought that was an interesting statistic. We'll be doing business surveys about this funding in December, and we do expect to put a little bit of money, additional money towards this. I'm not sure of the exact amount, but it will fund some of those first phase, the micro businesses that were your priority that went through the quality control checks. So we will be finishing out a little bit of money, extra money in this program. Next slide. So this is food and beverage support. So the available budget, I guess I didn't save that slide, my apologies. But anyway, it actually should be, I thought I changed the number. It should be $6.4 million, not 4.6. And just to let you know, this one is like the Small Business Recovery Fund overprescribed. Total applications are 752. One of the things we were asked to do is to pull out all of those food and beverage establishments from the $30 million, the Small Business Relief Fund, into food and beverage. So the total amount of applications is 4.3 million. To date, we've awarded 123 grants for about $2.6 million. And then 47% of the businesses awarded are minority owned, 25% are female owned, and 72% have been in business for 4 or more years. Next slide. So the Hotel Motel Support Program, the total budget is $6 million. Applications submitted are 123. We estimate, you'll see the number of hotel rooms there, so somewhere between 15 and 16,000. We're finalizing the review and the documentation approval of this program, and then we'll go ahead and start the process internally to get these checks to these business owners. Next slide. Music venue support. So this program launched from October 12th to October 23rd. The idea was to provide, you all asked us to create a program that provided funding to a very hard-hit industry, which is our music venues, local music venues. They have to be locally owned and operated in Charlotte. So the subsidy is a 9-month rent or mortgage assistance. The minimum subsidy is $15,000. Right now, we are reviewing and finalizing the awards to grant recipients, and we're looking at a total fund for this of $757,000. Next slide. I do want to actually talk about, one other program. These are the ones that we have. It's the Small Business Innovation Fund. That's the one that Center City Partners is doing. I know that's not on the slide, but that's the one that Center City Partners is doing. And that's to fund certain type of innovative technology that a business needs to pivot their operations to be able to address the impacts of COVID-19. So the example I'll give, this is a fund that was originally set up with Honeywell. And so I've been on the review committee for the first couple of rounds. An example I'll give is there's a bridal shop in town. And when you go to buy your wedding dress, that's a time when you bring lots of people with you to check that out, with you. And now you can't do that in COVID. So really, how do they make the space come alive so that the bride and the family and the friends can have that same experience, but do it in a very safe way? Okay, Resilient, I'm sorry, can you back up a slide? Resilient Re-Up. So this program launched last week. We're really excited about it. This is the business resiliency planning that we talked about, that this was a priority for you all. This program provides structured programming and one-on-one coaching to help small businesses stabilize. Looks like we'll have 60 small businesses that'll be eligible for this program. A local minority female-owned firm, Asphalis Advisors, is our contractor for this program. And anyone who would like additional information should go to charlotteopenforbusiness.com. Next slide. This is our small business support program. This was the first one that we launched. So it was originally 2 million designated. We spent 1.96 million. That's how the awards came in. 12 of our business resource partners are engaging in this project. They're going well. Everyone should be fully expensed by December 30th. Examples of some projects, you've got the SBTDC. They did a 10-week course, and then they actually had a pitch day. Christy Floyd on our team was one of the judges for that pitch day, which was really fun. Ready CLT, they served about 10,000 businesses, and then distributed 20,000 pieces of PPE to small businesses. And then we have the Latin American Chamber of Commerce. They had community kitchens. What they did is they partnered with 40 Hispanic, Latino-owned food businesses to serve over 8,000 families that needed meals. Next slide. So these next three are Fran's fantastic team. I will say that I think every single part of our department has had some role in the implementation of this strategy. It is truly a team effort, along with our planning department and then Charlotte Communications. So workforce partner support is structured very similarly to the small business partner support. There's some really awesome creative projects in this as well. $3.5 million has been awarded to 25 organizations. And so some examples are listed below. I won't, for the sake of time, go into those. But this is a really, really cool project, and I can't wait to see how some of these turn out. I think it's going to be awesome. All right, next slide. So then the Renew program is up and running. It's having a ton of success. 50 participants are currently enrolled in the training classes, with the training partners, Urban League and Goodwill. This program has really been possible because of strong corporate partnerships from Train Technologies and MSS Solutions, and then there's some other corporate partners in the industry. The first cohort will graduate on December 10th, and then they will go into mock interviews and a career fair to really prepare for that job placement, which is just, honestly, the fact that they get paid a stipend when they're going through this program, as well as there's that job placement at the end, is really what makes this such a signature, I think, program for our city and our community. Next slide. And then we've got the Thrive hiring grants. This one's going very, very well as well. We have 10 applicants that have received, applications that have been received. We've got 2 awarded so far that total $110,000. There are 5 totaling $483,000 under consideration, and we are excited to say that 4 of those are in the business revitalization corridor geography, which qualifies them for an extra $1,000 per hire when they're in that geography. So it goes from $5,000 to $6,000. So that is my update, or our update for the program, and just thank you for all your support. It's been awesome, so we really appreciate it.
So can I echo something really quick? Because it's incredible to be where we are at this point in the calendar year and think about all of the hard work. And so I want to do a huge thanks to Holly and all of the staff that's really been involved with this, and Fran's team. I mean, so many others have really dug in to make this happen, to get this money out. And then also the external partners that have helped us implement, but then also applied for grants and then done work out into the communities. It's really amazing to see what we as a community can do in a very short amount of time to offer assistance. And so I just think it's a big round of thank you to the team, as well as to our outside partners.
You just dropped the mic, so I'm not going to touch that one. Councilmember Ashmere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Holly, great work, and to the entire team. I know we had implemented Navigator program that Mr. Newton had championed. Could you give us an update on that and a metrics on that as well, to see how we did, and were we able to get more applications as a result?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head that came from the Navigators. That was a successful program. That program was for the $30 million Small Business Relief Fund. That's where we did that. It was that second phase when we opened it back up, really making sure that we were able to reach out to our international business community. And, but I can absolutely pull together some numbers that came from, that directly correlate with the Navigator program. It's no problem at all. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be great. I just wanted to see if it worked or if it not, I certainly have heard great things about it. I'm just interested in seeing what impact did it make.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Tracy's sending me a warning. So, Councilmember Johnson, you're next. Go right ahead.
I just want to say thank you for that extraordinary work. I think we forget, you know, the pandemic that we're in and how extraordinary these times are. And our city staff, Tracy and Holly and Fran, you guys really stepped up. I mean, those programs are amazing. So it's an honor just to be on council right now and be able to serve the city as we are. Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome.
So I'm gonna try to do something special. So make sure, can we do a wide screen? Can I see all the committee members? Can we do a wide screen? So to follow up with Councilman Johnson, I'm sorry, the ones that virtual. There we go. Where's the vice chair, and can we get there we go. So committee members, I learned this on another Zoom call. So can we get a round of applause to our staff? And I heard the way you do it, it's like this. So. Come on, Grandpa. Okay, well, we're doing this way. We're doing this way, old school. So, thank you.
What is that?
So kudos, great job, staff. And so I'm gonna be totally transparent in 2 minutes. Tracy said a no, because she knows this is something been my pet peeve for a long period of time. I like being number one. And I felt like we were losing the space in small business. And so Tracy's note is, are you happy now? And what we're gonna do going forward. I think we all are happy that Councilman Johnson point, but more important, the customers we are serving. And so Tracy, I said, let's keep the momentum going. I still want them to look at the city as the small business go-to entity in the city of Charlotte. So I have nothing else to say, but I'm extremely happy. And if it was valuation time, you all. So last thing, and the most important, but you just want to do a handout? You want to go through them quickly?
Well, no, I think that just knowing that we have a hard stop at 3:30, but you, council will see the same presentation tonight.
Okay.
Just one thing I just want to reiterate is really, really special time right now for Corridors of Opportunity.
That's right.
We have 3 RCAs on Beatty's Ford tonight. Woo, we're getting projects done.
Grandpa, well, you just celebrate, man.
We had an incredible event last week on West Boulevard where Councilmember Watlington got to announce a lot of projects. And then everybody. And that was, you know, a lot of that goes to Councilmember Graham, you all pushing us.
That's right.
As well as Councilmember Watlington on those corridors. But then the last thing I'll say is, in my mind, the 2 council actions that are related to Eastland tonight are the kickoffs to the Albemarle and Central corridor. And then Councilmember Johnson will do a recap of 85 and Sugar Creek. So that's 4 of the 6 in less than 6 months.
4 to 6.
Now it's valuation time.
So, see, that's what she was telling me in our one-on-one. She said.
No, so I think it's just a good time
really
to
is.
celebrate the work that is being done on our corridors.
You know, and I'm going to end with this because I know we need to get ready. But so often we are accused that government can be slow. I think it's a prime example that when we're committed, staff is committed, council is committed, that we can work together as a team to make this city better in a short time period. So kudos to everyone. See everybody at, what time is our council meeting? 4 o'clock. Oh, see you in 30 minutes. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.